the next item is a COVID update, and this is going to be the first of a weekly update that will be provided to the State Finance Council. John Rolfe, who is from Wichita, owns the Thrive restaurant enterprise, and is also on the board of Regents, has agreed to chair this, what we're calling the Regional Reporting Group. And I'm going to let John tell you what the structure of this is and what the purpose of this is. John, you there?
Yep. Thank you, Governor Kelly. I assume you guys can hear me okay? I'm good. So this update probably be just a little longer than what my normal one would be as I give a little background. But essentially, the state has been broken into 7 healthcare regions. It's a map that already existed under KDHE and the healthcare coalitions. And you can think about it as healthcare moves regionally, from the rural into the regional, then into the major metros. And have had some wonderful partners, since the bipartisan group really endorsed this idea to get weekly report outs, what's going on regionally. One, it helps in those regions people to know what's going on. There's you can get county by county numbers, you could get statewide numbers, but things really move regionally in this way. So it's been helpful to be able to hear what's going on in those regions and to make that available for people, and then to be able to bundle all that up and to be able to report to you all. Now, I fully understand that I can tell you a whole lot more about restaurants and how they run than I can about healthcare. I've learned a lot in the last few weeks. I think part of the hope is that as I learn and translate it, helps translate it, out to the majority of the population that doesn't live in the healthcare world every year. I've had just some great partners along the way. A nice coalition's come behind to help support this project. The Kansas Hospital Association, Kansas Leadership Center, League of Kansas Municipalities, Kansas Association of Counties, the State Department of Education, KDHE, the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, United Way, Emergency Management, and the Kansas Healthcare Coalitions have all played really integral roles. And we're on a weekly call together where they feed back information to me to let me know what's going on in the regions, what they're hearing from their counterparts, and to also push the word out. I just want to specifically thank Audrey Dunkel, Chad Austin with the Kansas Hospitality Association. They're producing this dashboard of which you guys were sent and the materials ahead of time for us, and breaking it out. They break this out regionally. You guys are getting the rolled up version of this, but this is the center portion of our conversations on these calls. What we're doing is we're doing 30-minute calls, no more than 30 minutes. They're scheduled back to back to back every Tuesday afternoon. The calls start with the major metros. So the first one at 1 o'clock is Kansas City. The second one is South Central Kansas, which includes Wichita, mainly because if those hospital systems and healthcare systems get clogged up, it starts to impact the other ones. So it helps feed information into the other calls. There's a little break at 3 o'clock, but these broadcast live to YouTube. And on the website, which is on the state's coronavirus website, you can sign up to get an email sent to you with a link to the call or their Zoom calls and the dashboard. And so you can get that and consume it on your own time if you can't attend the live meeting. The structure of the calls, essentially I go through the dashboard, which I'll review with you all here in a minute. And then we have someone that's on the ground in that region from public health perspective that touches base with their peers in that region, gives an update from that perspective and a little color to the numbers so they become more meaningful. And then someone from the hospital network then comes and gives a little color to the numbers on that side and what they're hearing from their counterparts in other hospitals in that region. And then we've been having what we call boots on the ground, which is someone who's in one of the hospitals. We've had CMOs and chief nursing officers and different people, both in very rural critical access hospitals all the way to some of the larger providers in our state, just to say, hey, here's what we're dealing with. This is what the last week's been like for us. And that color just helps bring it all to life. I think you can look at a dashboard and not have an idea what's going on. And as you hear the stories, helps you understand what's going on. And I'll tell you, I've just been so impressed with the people that are servicing our state in the healthcare divisions. They are working long hours and just continue to accommodate and adapt to take care of people. They already had high regard for me, and it's only gotten stronger. So the nature of these calls have not been, nor will they ever be prescriptive, nor will I sit in front of you all and tell you what I think that you ought to do with the information. This is really just an idea of how to gather information and to create a structure where people regionally can get that information, whether they're elected officials in counties or cities or school boards, or they're business leaders or community leaders or parents or caring for older adults, that they can all hear that same information, what's going on in their region, in the hospitals and healthcare systems that they rely on, and get that information out. And then for me to get that information to you all once a week so you have an idea of what's going on. The hope is this project only lasts, no more than 8 to 12 weeks at the most, as we perceive that the belly of the beast, the pressure of the healthcare system for this thing will be January and February. So getting this communication system set up so we can have an idea week to week what's going on is important. Okay, so that before I get into the dashboard, I'll stop there to see just as far as the structure of these calls, if there's any questions from the group.
Does anyone have any questions for John? John, I have one suggestion, is that you said that this is broken up into 7 regions. Would it be possible to sort of have a map of those regions so we know what counties are in which region?
Absolutely, and we can email you the address. I'll read it to you all, and you can write it down here if you want. Let me. Sorry, I got a lot of sheets of paper here. It is right here. Okay, covid.ks.gov. I assume, which all of you are very familiar with. covid.ks.gov/report-outs. If you go onto that, you can see the KDHE map about halfway down, and it's got you can see the 7 regions. It's important to note that KC Metro region, they have a really good partnership with the counties, the healthcare system on the other side of the state line. And so those numbers up there often are, from the hospital side, are reflective of what's going on the Missouri side of the state line for that metro also, since the virus doesn't know kind of where our borders are, and you go to the hospital that's closest to you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for John? Okay, John, you want to just continue?
Yeah, so you guys were all sent the dashboard. I'll tell you, 3 numbers that we've been focusing on. The first one that you'll see on there, which is about 5 columns over, says percentage of hospitals anticipating staffing shortages this week. So when the hospitals are experiencing problems, it's usually, I found this easy to understand. It's either staff, stuff, or space. Stuff was the issue, as you guys can remember, back in March, April, where we were short on PPE. The main constraint on our system right now is around staffing, with people out either in quarantine or infected or with other issues of which they can't work. And so we get a sense regionally what's going on from a staffing shortage week to week to see what people are anticipating, and see how that number goes up and down. Then when you move over, you can see a sense of kind of the COVID patients in that region. But we spend a lot of time looking at the adult staffed ICU beds. Someone said that an ICU bed that's unstaffed is just another bed. And so it's, what can they staff and what's that percent of availability? And so you can see both the number and the percentage of what's available. And it's important to point out that this dashboard is static. It's a point in time, and these numbers actually are quite dynamic. And so as I've been following the numbers, I get a touch point every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For instance, in the South Central region, there was 30 beds available on a Friday. The next Monday, there was 130 beds available. And the next Wednesday, there was 40 beds available. And so even in the midst of the days, you can think of people moving in and out of the ICU. Those numbers can change. And so it's just just want to make sure you guys understand this is just a point in time, but it gives you an idea of where we're at. And as we look at it week to week, we can see how it's moving and if we're approaching, how close to capacity that we're approaching. The other thing, knowing that ventilators had been an issue early in the pandemic, that is also on there. Clearly, we have a lot of ventilator capacity, and I'm not hearing from anybody that there's issues there. The other big number we like to look at is the number of COVID cases. If you flip to the third page of that, you can see these are the 6 regions. We aren't able to pull Kansas City out by itself. At least on this sheet, we pull out those 3 counties on the individual report outs, but this gives you an idea of what's going on. And so you can see that we've actually experienced some good news in Western Kansas, in Northwest and Southwest, where there was this peak really in the middle of November, and those numbers have come down. But in South Central, we're seeing really in North Central and the Northeast and Kansas City, those numbers have plateaued, which is good. And then there's a lot of concern when you look at the Southeast part of the state. And so this is part of where you can see the power of looking at this regionally rather than just by counties or states, as you get a sense of where the hotspots are or what's going on in different areas, and then can correlate that to what might happen with the hospital population, because the graphs almost can mirror each other by about anywhere from a 2 to 4 week spread, where the caseload goes up and then the hospital load follows that suit. You guys can flip through the rest of it. There's bundled up numbers and things like that. But as far as the regional breakouts, those are really the important points. And then you can see what's going on a little bit by county on the 4th page there. So that is the dashboard that we're looking at. Does that all make sense to you when you look at the dashboard?
Does anyone have any questions for John? John, I have one on the very last column in the dark blue. It said reported COVID deaths. And you said it was a static number. So is that the number? What is that number?
I believe that's what they're pulling from KDHE. And I do believe that those deaths are where the person died, not necessarily the county that they're from. So if someone's being moved out of their county, if they live in Seward County and they are in Sedgwick in that hospital when they pass away, I believe that's counted in South Central. So is that for the day, the December 21st, or is that? That is a great question. I will have that answer for you next week if that's okay.
That'd be fine. Great. That's
probably better than me guessing.
That was the only one that sort of I couldn't figure out myself. But you know what? Adam Profit is saying that there's something in the notes at the bottom, and I'm not finding it right now. What do you, Adam?
The very last bullet. It's got 3 stars in the table. You can see reported.
Okay.
And then the very last bullet below that, the footnote.
Yeah, there we go.
Previous calendar day of reporting. Yep.
Okay, so previous calendar day. All right, that's good to know.
Yeah,
and
thank you for clarifying.
Now you don't have any other work to do, John. Let it go. All right. Any other questions for John up to now? John, do you have more?
Yeah, so this is now the part which would be the normal parts of what my weekly updates are for. So we'll look at the dashboard, but then the other thing that we're really monitoring, and we spent on the calls yesterday, if you have a chance to watch any of them, we brought Dr. Watson on from the Mission Control app. He's a doctor who practiced in Kansas for a very long time and helped found that company, and has had very quick adoption across the state. And that's actually given us raw data on how long transfers are taking. So when you think about a strain on the healthcare system and on the hospital system in particular, the transfer data. Yes. John?
Yep. Could you explain Mission Control to everybody so you know what you're talking about? Thanks.
Thank you, Governor. I'd be happy to. So Cheyenne Mountain Software is a company that saw a need. So what generally happens when you need someone to transfer, they get more severe or acute, and this isn't just a acute COVID patient, it could be cardiac or any number of issues, and you need to move them to a hospital that has more expertise, more tools, more medicines. You have someone in your hospital picks up the phone and calls to say, hey, we need to send someone into your hospital. This is their status. Do you have availability for them? Generally, that's not an issue. They're able to secure a bed, have the transport there in less than an hour, and move the person to where they need to get the help for whatever acute situation they're in. Well, what's happening now, and part of the staffing shortages that we were seeing is you're having to pull someone off of the floor to be on the phone for sometimes 6 or 7 hours making calls to hospitals trying to find a bed for a patient. And so you may have someone in Ellis County and Hayes that needs more services, and we actually heard this story out of Hiawatha, where there was a cardiac patient and it took 7 hours to find them a room that they needed to go to. And that's important because as you're sitting there as the cardiac patient, the acute or the critical access hospital staff's doing their best to keep you alive, but they don't have all the tools. And so generally, the longer it takes you to get to the hospital, the more you deteriorate and the worse shape you're in. And, we have, people in Western Kansas that are being shipped to Denver, and people are traveling further distances and having to make longer calls. And so what happens is this all now moves through software as the hospital systems get the Mission Control app, and they can see, who's on deferral. Deferral means the hospital's at capacity and not taking new patients, and have an idea of where to call. And then their team is also helping to make calls to move people. And so you can see of COVID patients in certain regions, how long it's taking them to find the transfer, how long the transfer is taking, if it's by on the ground or by an airplane. And so we'll start looking at those stats week to week, because as I've looked at the numbers, and I think most people have agreed that will be one of the early indicators of where there's cracks in the system for us as people are moving through it. And you can imagine, too, I'll point out, obviously the most tools in the toolkit, the most expertise are in the major metros. If you think of Wichita and Kansas City in our state, and then into the regionals, and then into the critical access hospitals. And so if Wichita and Kansas City get full, all of a sudden that puts a lot of strain back on the system where they can't get in to those hospitals. And so we have critical access hospitals that, yesterday out of Abilene, the chief nurse there was telling us that they have 2 patients on CPAP machines, and they've never run CPAP machines before. And they're having to learn new things because they are unable to move those patients into other beds in Salina or in other places they can get them to. And we heard in Pittsburgh, for instance, that they have 10 ICU beds available, but they have 12 ICU patients in there, 9 of which were on ventilators. And the reason they had 9 was because they couldn't find other places to send them where there is greater expertise. And so that's where you start to see the deterioration. And again, like I said, learning that these are really dynamic and fluid environments where you can catch a break and patients start moving around, or you can go 18 hours where there's a very difficult time finding places in the state, and sometimes in a 4 or 5 state area. The gal from Lakin who was talking to us yesterday, had said that one of the hospitals in North Texas that they try and send patients to is already on a 10-bed waiting list. And so she spends every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday calling 7 to 12 centers just to see where they're at so they can know where to send patients. So the transfer portion of this has become really a critical issue as you think about the healthcare system and as it moves regionally, because generally people want to stay closer to home. And we're finding that they're having to move further away and wait longer to get there. So that's where the mission control data, so we really laid that out on these last sets of calls. We'll be looking at that data more often. And I have a whole list of stories like that. For instance, last week, the Hayes regional CEO had said in the month of November that they had to turn down over 160 patients to be able to come into their center, 75% of that, which was from their region, because they were full. And so And like I said, the hospitals move on to deferral for several hours and move off, and so we're wanting to watch all that very, very closely. And so I think one of the themes from the calls yesterday was that we are very close to the edge. We've gotten comfortable being close to the edge, and it's something that we're going to want to continue to watch to see if there is indeed the anticipated post-holiday spike that would put a lot of pressure on the system. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. On the good news front, there was those vaccines had shown up for both some public health workers and in the hospitals. It was a real injection of hope into the system. I really could feel the energy that they felt like they were finally being able to play offense versus just having to play defense. Important to note, I'm sure you all understand this, but the Pfizer vaccine, you get your first shot, it's 21 days later before you get your second shot, then 2 weeks before you're considered fully immunized. The Moderna is a 4-week window between the two shots. So we're really 5 or 6 weeks at the earliest before those frontline workers are considered immunized, which is something we'll want to keep. But the message was clear, just to not let the positive news of the vaccine. There's not the time to pull our foot off the pedal of trying to beat the virus. KLC, I just one thing, and I'd like to bring these to this group too. And each call with a bright spot. They're pretty heavy calls and pretty heavy information as far as what we're dealing with the state. It's good just to catch people doing something right as they steer into the virus. My favorite bright spot of the last 2 weeks, I'll share with you just really quickly, was the Humboldt Police Department. Generally does a Toys for Tot drive this time of year. They decided to do an adopt a grandparent for the 73 grandparents in their area that didn't have family or family that was going to come. They put it out on their Facebook page, and people from 4 other states, and then additionally from all over Kansas, bought presents and adopted these grandparents, and then the police department baked cookies. And it's just people leaning in, finding ways to do what they can, in this virus. And so it's just a great story of Kansans doing great things. So I always like to end on a bright spot. Those two themes that would be out there, one being we are close to the edge. I hear that a lot, especially from the 2 major metro regions. So we'll want to watch that. It is clogging up the system from time to time. And the other thing is just, we're seeing the choices that people make individually do impact the community. And so as people can continue to make good choices as individuals, it can really help the community and the state. And for that, I'll be happy to take questions. And I'm also happy to take feedback from all of you if you'd like me to tailor this report in any different way for you week to week.
Okay, any questions for John? John, do you have an email you could give to people so that if they do have some suggestions for modification of the reporting, they can just email that to you?
Yeah, is that something we can share with this group after, or is it something you want me to just
I think you could just, why don't we do it after?
Yeah, I will say this, if you have anybody
that put it out there for the whole world.
Yeah, I will say this, Governor, we don't have time for live Q&A on these calls, on the regional calls. So we do have an email address, ks.regionalreport@gmail.com. And people are giving us feedback, catching bright spots, and asking questions, and we're able to work those in regionally into the next call. So,
okay, that's really
public,
good.
That's a good place to go.
Why don't you say that email again?
ks.regionalreport@gmail.com.
Okay, very good. Thank you, John. Any questions for John?
I do, Governor.
Yes,
Right.
Is that Speaker?
Hey, John, do you have anything on your dashboard about the vaccines and who's getting them and who's not? I know we're hearing reports of it's just right now just for the medical field inside of hospitals. Has it been expanded to that or into our nursing homes and things like that?
That'd be a good question for KDHE. We don't have it on our dash at this point, but we know that that will become a central part of these calls is sharing that information. It was interesting just hearing on the calls yesterday how different, groups, your larger systems, had things, well lined out, but there was a time period from when you crack these things open, how quickly you could get them out. And The smaller regional places really had to be more thoughtful on, their staff and who they could give it to and who they couldn't, who wanted to take it and who didn't. And so there were some places where, they got through their initial and then were able to start getting out into some of the long-term care facilities. But I think, right now where the numbers are at, it's generally for the frontline workers in public health. And as we have updates, be glad to give those.
Speaker Reichman, I talked with KDHE just yesterday, and I actually asked sort of that exact same question. And right now, the vaccines have gone nearly exclusively to sort of the high-risk frontline medical workers, those who are working with COVID patients, whether they are in hospitals or clinics, nursing facilities, or prisons. And then there has been some now beginning overflow into our long-term care facilities where they do residents and staff, and overflow into our hospitals and other health settings, even our local public health departments, where they will be next in line getting whatever vaccines are available. We expect that really all of the vaccines that we will get through the beginning of January, perhaps even into the middle of January, will be almost exclusively used for healthcare workers. That's just given the number of doses that we're getting. Then we will move from there. Sometime, mid-January, we will start to move down the line, looking at the essential workers and others. People over 75, we are getting routine updates and guidelines from CDC, and as those adjust, we are adjusting. But we expect that sometime right after the first of the year, we will have a more definitive list of who will be vaccinated when. So hope that helps.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know there's been some confusion. A lot of doctors and clinics, people think they've been vaccinating their healthcare workers. It seems like it's just been in the hospitals. And I know just reading some of the news and kind of what's going on in DC, a lot of elected officials are getting vaccine to kind of show that it's safe. I think our state knows it's safe at this point, and I'm not sure us modeling that is helpful, but getting the vaccines to those in the front lines is very important. And that's kind of where we're hoping we can get to.
Well, Speaker Reichman, I know from personal experience that it has gone beyond hospitals. My husband just went back to work, came out of retirement, and is working in a respiratory clinic here where they're screening folks before they go in for surgical procedures. And he was vaccinated yesterday. So I think it is reaching beyond just your brick and mortar hospitals. We have a long way to go. There are a number of other healthcare providers out there in different settings who we need to reach, and we plan to do that over the next few weeks.
And Speaker Reichman, there was one little pleasant surprise in all of that, which is of the Pfizer vaccine. Each vial was supposed to have 5 doses, and they ended up having closer to 6. And so we were able to stretch it further, the first shipments, than we thought we would initially. So that was a bright spot. Okay.
Any other questions for John? Well, John, I want to thank you very much. That was a very thorough report, and it's clear you already know more about health than you were giving yourself credit for. So appreciate your willingness to take this on. I think you are really providing valuable service and valuable information. With that, I want to move on to the next item on the agenda. It reads a recovery office update. The fact of the matter is, it's really going to be more a stimulus bill update. Given that Congress passed the stimulus bill, it really would change what we need to do in the recovery office. So what I thought I'd do is just give you sort of a high-level overview of what we know about the stimulus bill. I think you've all probably seen that the Senate passed it, the House passed it, and at this point, we're up in the air about whether the president will sign it before Saturday, the day after Christmas. The day after Christmas is the day that unemployment benefits will run out, and a number of other things will cease to happen. So I'm hoping that we'll get that signature on it by Christmas Day. So at any rate, Congress did approve a new relief package. It's worth a little over $900 billion. The bill itself is about 5,600 pages long, so nobody has really gone through it fully yet, but there are lots of eyes all over it, and we're working to go through it ourselves, and we know we've got some folks in Washington doing the same thing, so that we'll know exactly what's in it, and exactly what strings may be tied to the funding, and how those funds will be administered versus how the first round was administered. So we will get that information to you as soon as we know. The one thing that we do know is that it extended the ability to spend the first funds, the CARES Act funding, through the end of 2021. So the original deadline was December 30th, 2020. It is now December 30th, 2021. That for states like Kansas, we were pretty proactive and pretty aggressive in getting our funding out and allocated. And so at this point, all of our funds have been allocated. So one way that, there are a couple ways that we're going to benefit from the extension, and probably most significantly in the area of testing. As many of you know, well, you all know, that we put a fair chunk of change into testing. It was going to be very, very difficult for us to spend that money by December 30th. Now we can extend the expenditure of those funds into 2021, and that's huge help. That will allow us to keep that Go Get Tested program operating for another couple of months, at least. The other thing that will allow us to do is give our subrecipients, primarily our counties, an extension on when they need to have actually expended their funds, and we are working with them as we speak to make sure they understand that the extension will be there. Right now, I think we've told them, because we don't have enough data yet from Washington to give a final answer, but that will extend the length of time that they can spend those funds to no earlier than March 1st. So that just should help them figure out how to deal with the funds that they were not able to get out the door yet. So that's there. The subrecipients, the counties, will need to present their spending reports. The next spending reports will come in on January 6th. And that will give us a much clearer picture of where things stand and a clear idea of how long we ought to extend their ability to spend the funding. So like I said, we know probably what everybody else in the world knows now, sort of the top lines on this bill. As we dig down and figure out what it means, as we get more information from Washington, we will make sure that information comes to all of you and others. Any questions about the stimulus bill? Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Clay Britton, who will give an overview of the executive order and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Governor Kelly. This is Clay Britton. Council, again, a review of an executive order under House Bill 2016. The governor issued Executive Order 20-70 yesterday, which is sort of a follow-up order to a few previous orders related to driver's licenses and state identification cards. The previous orders had extended the deadline to renew expiring driver's licenses and identification cards. to January 26th. This extends that deadline out now to June 30th of 2021. The Division of Vehicles still has over 100,000 licenses out there that need to be renewed, and they're able to handle about 29,000 each month. So they're going to need more time to do that without a crush of folks coming into their offices or trying to renew online. And as the pandemic emergency continues to be problematic for those folks coming in, this allows them to have more time, spread that time out, and renew online if they need to. As you may remember, a previous executive order lifted a statutory limitation on online renewals that only allowed folks up to the age of 50 to renew online. But because folks over the age of 50, and particularly over the age of 65, are more susceptible to COVID illness, this lifts that limitation for anyone who prefers to renew online can do that regardless of their age. As with all the other emergency executive orders, should the disaster declaration expire before June 30th, this order would expire along with it. So that's sort of the same boilerplate language we have for all of them. I think that is it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Clay? Okay, hearing none, that concludes the December 23rd State Finance Council meeting. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, Madam Governor. Dan Hawkins.
Okay, Representative Hawkins moves for adjournment. Is there a second?
Tom Sawyer.
I'll second it.
Okay, and Representative Sawyer seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?